In this video, I'm gonna share the high probability levels that I'm gonna be watching for the SPX going into next week. And I'm also gonna share my thoughts about why do I think that we will continue to see higher prices in the market going into October. If you're interested in this information, make sure to stick all the way through this video. Hey traders, welcome back to Valareso Capital. On this video, we're gonna go through the market update and we're also gonna take a look at some of the stocks that I'm gonna be watching for next week and some of those opportunities. Remember guys that this video is for informational purposes only, is based just on my personal opinion and it's not financial advice. So let's start right here with the SPX and what are gonna be some of the levels that I'm gonna be watching for next week. So if we go back to last week's video, we were talking for a possible target all the way to 5,800. That was the thesis that we created in the market. And we can see that we did had a rally in the market. However, we only advanced all the way to 5,775-ish. So we got a little bit short of the target that I was looking for. However, I do think that going into next week, there is a probability that we will continue to see higher prices. Now, why do I think that we will continue to see that? First and foremost, the market continues to be in an uptrend. You can see right here that we continue to have moving averages pointing to the upside, meaning that prices on average continue to rise. That is going to be the first step when I'm looking at the market, keeping things pretty easy. Now you can see right here that we had this really nice gap in the market. And what is really interesting is that price was able to trade above that anchor VWAP during the entire week. Now, given that we had these two selling candles on the week, I do think that there is a probability that we're going to see a little bit of a pullback going into next week. I'm going to share the level that I'm going to be watching for support on the SPX and what is going to be kind of the most important target that I'm going to be watching for next week as well. So if we take a look at the SPX here, momentum continues to be really positive. Not a lot of selling volume. If we take a look at volume, I don't think that is the most important thing as I use the anchor VWAP as my guide. Now, these levels that I have here is something new on the charts. If you have been following me for a while, you know how obsessed and interested I am in Fibonacci. And there's a really nice trader. He is Sari. I don't know if you follow him on Twitter, but he provides these really nice studies about Fibonacci and how he uses ATR levels. And then he's looking for those Fibonacci extensions, looking for the ATR levels based on whatever time frame you're using. The time frame that I'm watching is going to be the weekly. So these levels are going to be the weekly levels going for next week. We are using the close of the week as that baseline, and then you're going to be able to look for all those Fibonacci extensions automatically using the ATR. I think this is an amazing way because I tend to do my Fibonacci using the drawing tool, which is the one right here. So, but I prefer to use, if I can automate my charts as much as possible and get that bias out of the way, I tend to lean towards that. I tend to lean towards the math doing the work for me. And then that is a better way, in my understanding, to watch for levels in the market. So if we take a look, this yellow line that we have here is going to be the first level of support going into next week. We do want to stay above that level if we want to see higher prices. You can also see that we have the 8 exponential. I'm also using the exponential moving averages once again. I don't know exactly why did I change them, but I have found much more success using these ones, so I just have them back on in my charts. So you can see right here, if we happen to get a pullback back into that 8 exponential, that also coincides with the first level of support using these ATR levels. So I'm watching for a possibility of the SPX testing that 5,700 level once again. That will be the first level of support that I'm going to be watching. And then I do think that there's a probability of a continuation all the way to 5,800, which was the target that we were watching for last week. So keeping things pretty simple for the SPX. If we take a look at the QQQ, we're going to see kind of a very similar pattern. And that pattern is that we have this gap to the upside, we have selling candles, but not a lot of selling, right? If you take a look at the volume that we had here, and the momentum continues to be really, really positive. Now, can we see a little bit of a pullback to test that 8 exponential? I do think that that's a very high probability, and I do think that we have a really clean path to close this gap that we had open. That's going to be somewhere around 596, 496. Perhaps we even going to go all the way to that 500 level as a psychological number, but keep in mind this level. That's going to be somewhere around 482. I do think that that's going to be a high probability level of support on the QQQ, and we already know that 5700 is going to be a high probability of support in the SPX. So don't be surprised if we see a little bit of a pullback at the beginning of the week. I do think that that's going to be a really nice opportunity to get long, and I don't think that we need to get any worried or start to create narratives about the market topping or anything like that, because for now, price action is pretty bullish going into next week. Now, as for some setups, I'm going to share some of the setups that I'm watching, but I also want to mention the IWM here because I do think that there's going to be a probability, because if you see the IWM, you can see right here that the IWM has been selling off during the entire week while the SPX and the Nasdaq were advancing. So I do think that there's a probability that even if we see a little bit of a pullback in the SPX and the QQQs, mostly driven by the mega caps, I do think that we could see some movement to the upside in the IWM and a little bit of a rotation into the small caps. So keep in mind the IWM here. If I'm watching a level of support, that's going to be somewhere around 219. That's going to be the first level of support that I'm going to be watching in the IWM if we happen to see a little bit of a pullback. But if not, I do think that probably if we are able to get above this anchor VWAP from this high here, which is somewhere around 221, if we happen to get a close above that level, I do think that eventually the small caps are heading all the way to that 230 level, which is going to be one full ATR, one full 100 extension all the way to the upside using these ATR Fibonacci levels. So that's going to be what I'm going to be watching for the indexes. I don't think that we need to be surprised if we happen to see a little bit of a pullback. Now, if we take a look at some of the setups, there are many setups that I'm going to be watching. One setup, of course, is going to be IWM. I currently have a position in the TNA, basically break even. I do have my position somewhere around these levels right here. One name that I really like is going to be UPST. I do have a position in this one. I started that position somewhere around 39 on this pullback that we had right here. If we happen to see a little bit of a pullback in the beginning of the week, be aware of this Fibonacci level. That's going to a Fibonacci level, that anchor VWAP level. That's going to be somewhere around 40, 39.70. If we happen to get that pullback, I do think that that's going to be an opportunity to get long UPST. First level that I'm going to be watching is this Fibonacci extension, which is going to be somewhere around 44. That's going to be my target for UPST. I already took a little bit of profits here, but this setup is looking fine. And I do think that probably you're going to get an opportunity to get in if you don't have this position yet. Another name that I'm watching for the small cap is going to be Carvana. Really nice flag here. You can see right here that we're getting that contraction in price. Perhaps we're going to see a little bit of expansion. In terms of entries, I do think that we have a really nice level around here, around 165. If we happen to see a little bit of a pullback into that level, I do think that that's going to be kind of the best entry that we're going to be looking for Carvana. And then perhaps we're going to see a continuation all the way to 180. These are going to be the two setups that I'm going to be watching for the small caps. And of course, the IWM, which you can use the TNA as a plate for that one. Now, in terms of mega caps, perhaps we're going to see a little bit of a pullback at the beginning of the week, but most likely those names are going to offer some opportunities as pullback buys. So first name is going to be Apple. I think Apple is looking awesome. I do have a position in this one, but if we happen to see a little bit of pullback, I don't think that you need to get scared of anything. That's going to be somewhere around 227. That would most likely be an opportunity. I do think that eventually Apple is going to make a new all-time high. This one is looking pretty nice. And then next one is going to be SMH for the semis. You can see right here that we had this gap to the upside. We tested this level of resistance right here and this gap. But I do think that if we happen to test that 8 exponential somewhere around 245.35, I do think that that is going to be an opportunity to get some exposure in the semis, perhaps waiting for a little bit of a hammer candle right here. Then most likely, I do think that we're going to see continuation. And then let's take a look at NVDA. I do have a position in this one, a couple of drawings, right? I did have a position early on the week, but let me just hide this one right here. Let's remove this graph right here. So I did start a new position on this pullback to the anchor VWAP, somewhere around 120. And if we happen to see a little bit more pullback, be aware of this level that's going to be somewhere around 120ish. I do think that that's going to be a really nice opportunity. I do think that Nvidia is going to test these levels somewhere around 130 at one point going into next week, or perhaps on the week after in October. So these are some of the setups. Here is the full list of the names that I'm going to be watching going into next week. Of course, I'm watching the Qs and the SPY, looking to get long on those using 3x leverage ETFs. And that is for the market in general, guys. I do think that we're going to see higher prices. The setups suggest that, and also the market that we're having right now. So once again, thank you so much for your time, guys. If you find any of this information valuable, remember to subscribe to the channel. That really helps the channel to continue to grow, and also new traders are going to be able to find this information valuable. Take care, and I will see you next week. Bye bye.